quick and simple things that you can do and get in the oven and then still have time to work around with. Now, I really am a fan of Food Club. However, On the Border makes these little round tortilla chips that I like so much better because they're easier to eat. They're not pointy and they don't stab you in the mouth. Biggest tray that I can find, okay? And I will show you why later, but I like the aluminum and the disposable because what we're gonna do is we're gonna make them and then we're gonna take them out of this pan. Okay? Spread them out as thinly as you can possibly get them, okay? It is very important because, like I said, there's nothing worse than getting a mound of nachos with 2 ounces of stuff on top and a whole bunch of dry chips in the bottom, okay? So keep them out, spread out as thin as you can, and then we're gonna start building. Pre-grilled, fully cooked, diced chicken, okay? Any frozen department downstairs has pre-grilled chicken breasts. You can get them fresh and cook them yourself if you feel better doing that. But they are in the frozen section. The reason I like these is because you can take one out at a time or you can take the whole bag out. Okay? You can thaw one out or you can thaw them all. Makes it a little bit easier. When you're using chicken or any other product with nachos, make sure it's small. There's nothing worse than getting a whole chicken breast on one nacho and having everything else be empty. And you laugh, and the only reason I said that is because I was at a restaurant about 2 weeks ago where that happened. And it was just absolutely terrible. So the smaller you can dice it and the more evenly you can spread it, that's your goal when you're doing nachos. We're going to take our chicken, we're going to spread it out. And like I said, the smaller you can dice this, the more evenly it will spread and the further it will go. And you saw how large a bowl this was. Okay, that was actually 1.02 pounds of fully cooked chicken breast. Okay, so it does go quite a ways with that. It does take up a large volume. And as if you can see on that overhead, it covers quite a bit of that bowl. Okay, the next thing we're going to work with is our black olives. And I did pour most of the liquid out before I started. Naturally, you don't really want to put a whole lot of liquid in your nachos. It just makes for wet nachos. We'll get them all on there. Then we're moving on to our banana peppers. Just because everybody should eat hot peppers. I think they're wonderful. Now, we won't use this whole jar naturally. We're just going to kind of lightly sprinkle them throughout. Banana peppers are not the real hot ones, and these are the milder version of the banana peppers. They do make two. They make a hot and a mild. The most important thing when working with banana peppers, let me see if I can get it, is to please take this out. It's the stem, and when they cut them whole, and you always end up with one of these in here, and I promise you the person at the party that bites into it isn't going to be real happy. So please be careful as you're doing it. Make sure you take them out. There's another one. Save yourself a little bit of grief. Okay, we got all them sprinkled on. I found one more stem. Next, my favorite, jalapenos. Everybody likes jalapenos, right? Again, you just want to sprinkle them in. Now, the nice thing about using this really big tray, the downside is you can't see from over there, but the camera's on. The nice thing is you get a whole lot better coverage because you can take one bag of chips and get a lot more product on it. Okay, we got our jalapenos on there. Now, onion and tomato. I use fresh tomato because it has a slightly better flavor and it's a whole lot less watery. Okay, if you get tomatoes in a can, they're going to be softer and they're going to be smushier. It's a good way to use a fresh product. To work with our tomato, let me slide this over just so everybody can see. I always put the stem down and cut right through the entire thing. Okay. And then I'll slice it about as thick as I want it to be diced. And then you can stand it up. Always take the back part that's got the most skin on it and try and chop that by itself. Most of us don't have real sharp knives at home and they know how hard it is to cut through tomato skin. And if you stack it, you end up sliding it around, cutting yourself, or smashing your tomatoes. If you pull it apart and you just do it by itself, it makes that one easy, and then this one's much easier to go back through. Now, I know the stem is still down there, but we're going to start to dice this, and then we're going to pull out those last few pieces once we get to it. We were able to get our stem out. And our tomatoes are all diced up pretty evenly. Now, if you don't trust yourself with that, by all means, cut down into it. And you want to make sure that you get most of the coloration, the white, the yellow, the green, out of the center. If you don't, go back through. And you can tell the difference because it's much more firm than what the tomato is. Okay? Same thing, we're just going to cut it down into slices. And we'll just lay our slices down and chop across them. And for the top part, now for the top part, if you have a knife and your knife's giving you trouble, by all means flip it over and cut it through the flesh part. That will make it a whole lot simpler. But if you do have a relatively good knife, you can cut through the skin. We'll take our tomatoes. We're going to pile them on there too. And don't feel bad or be shy about your ingredients. There's nothing worse than nachos with not enough stuff on them. So continue to add it until you can't hardly see it. And I can smell these, so I'm going to check them and make sure this oven's not biting me. Next, for our onion. Cut the top off. Cut just the very, very, very bottom off, just because you don't want that string and that hair to go back down through it. And then cut your onion in half. It's much easier to peel when you're only working with half of it because it gives you a place to start and actually to grab the skin and peel back. Now when you're peeling onions, anything that is much darker or a different color or soft really needs to come off. Anything that's got that papery or that slimy texture to it, we want to get rid of. We'll get rid of all this little stuff real quick. And now with your onions, the reason I say that you want to cut just the bare minimum off the back is because now I'm going to use that to work with and help me. And I'm going to cut, but I'm not going to cut all the way through the back of the onion. I'm going to cut as close to it as I can without actually doing it. And what that does is it allows me to hold the onion together. So now when I go back through and I cut it again, everything I do is diced. I'd almost bet that every person in this room has cut onions in slices and then gone back and chopped them up again, right? Simpler and a safer way to do it. It holds the onion for you. It keeps it from sliding around. And then once you get to the end, you just lay it flat and you trim right around the stem. And then all the waste you get is that tiny little bit right there. Do the same thing to the other half. I got this little piece here. Now, one thing you may notice as I'm doing this, I'm turning my knife. I went from this way, all the way straight, back to the other way. Basically, all I'm doing is trying to follow the contour of the onion. An onion's round, and if you cut straight up and down, if you look at this end, if you were to cut straight up and down this way, you would end up with a bigger piece here and a smaller piece here. So by turning your knife, it kind of keeps them much more consistent all the way across as you go. And again, we'll just go back through and pull down. Once you get to a point where you can't hold it or it doesn't feel steady, lay it flat and cross-cut it a few times, and then it's easier to stand back up and go back across it. And again, you end up with that tiny little bit of stem. There's virtually no waste. Now, with my onions, if you've noticed, I cut them a lot smaller than everything else, okay? That's because they're not really going to fully cook. They're not going to soften. An onion tends to be a whole lot stronger to bite into, okay? So we're going to cut it a lot smaller. And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're just going to sprinkle it the best we can. If you find a piece that's too big, just move it aside. Okay. Can't see a whole lot of tortillas, right? That's my goal whenever I'm making nachos. Nobody wants a dry chip. So try and pile that stuff on there the best you absolutely can. Now, the last thing we're going to do before we put them in the oven, cheese. Okay? We're not going to do the salsa and we're not going to do sour cream until they come out. They're better when they're cold, so we like to try and get our nachos ready, and then we use that to top them and garnish them. Back to my gloves real quick. Oven's actually working today. Why did I just say that? It should stop any minute now. I am using finely shredded cheddar cheese. You can hardly see it, okay? I like the fine stuff just because it spreads out a little better. You get a whole lot better coverage with it. It's the exact same cheese as the thicker shredded stuff, it's just a little bit thinner cut, okay? So if you have the thicker stuff, by all means use it. I like this simply because, like I said, it spreads out a little more evenly. You don't end up with a lot bigger chunks, you get a whole lot better coverage with it. Okay, we have that all ready. And as soon as we get, what's that?
What's that bag is
That is an 8-ounce bag. Okay. Now, all we have left to do with this is wait till our oven space opens up. We're going to slip this in the oven. Basically, all we're looking to do is to melt the cheese. I can taste it. Can everybody see that? It kind of got melted and it got all gooey and goopy. That's what we're looking for. Nobody wants to serve them in a giant pan. It doesn't really look very well. Kind of works a little silly. They're shakes and they're loose and they're movable. Now, I went back to this foil pan. Everybody says, why do you use foil pans? Well, you can break foil pans. Okay? You can open them up. You can take scissors to them. You can cut through them. Even through the edge that's really, really, really hard. If you work at it for a second, you can break through it. Now, when you do that, the side's going to be stubborn for a second, but we'll get through it. It opens that pan up, and now we have our real big serving tray. We can get them all out, and you can actually serve it instead of having it in that big old nasty pan. The last thing we have to do is we're going to take our salsa. Everybody likes salsa, right? This is a different variety. It's called corn and black bean. It's downstairs. It's everywhere. We're going to get this all back together. Now, whenever you're using it, make sure you stir it first because it will separate. It is a water in tomatoes. And then we're simply going to take it and kind of stream it back and forth across here. Again, I'm a fan of loaded nachos, not almost loaded nachos. And then the last thing we're going to do is our sour cream. And with this one, unless you put it in a pastry bag and kind of work it around, there's not a whole lot you can do with it. So we're just going to take it in small amounts and just kind of go all over it to spread it out. Now, if that's not bright enough for you, by all means, chop up some scallions, some green peppers, some something to sprinkle on top. But overall, it gives you a pretty good color, makes a big old mess.